I'd like to call the regular meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Patton.
Here.
Councilmember Spriggs.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bilbray.
Here.
Mayor Dedina.
Here.
Councilmember Bragg is absent.
And my pleasure to announce that we have members of Boy Scout Troop 866 of Imperial Beach. So listen to the Pledge of Allegiance. Gentlemen, may you come up to the dais, please, and listen to the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise, please. You guys talk here. Face the audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the uniform salute, if not right up your card. Salute. Face the flag. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ready? Two.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now we move on to the section of reports or announcements from our council colleagues. Councilmember Cotton, Councilmember Spriggs, any reports or announcements?
No real reports. Tomorrow is the monthly Metro KPA meeting, and there's nothing really of immediate concern on the agenda. It's mostly routine items and updates and some contract actions. So nothing really to share with you guys. Thanks.
And it's when also, are there any agenda changes requested? I attended the San Diego Borders meeting last week, and that was it was the annual meeting of elected officials from both sides of the border. So we have elected officials from Tijuana, Tecate, and Rosarito Beach, and as well as San Diego. So that was a great meeting. Also, great presentations and discussion about improving the borders to make it easier for people to cross the border walking and also riding their bikes. There's a big movement to do that. Actually, really good studies to show that, unfortunately, we suffer in terms of air quality in the South Bay. That's probably due to that border crossing. The other day, a friend of mine from Mexico waited 4 hours to cross the border walking. And so we really got to do a lot more to get that crossing, as well as the idea that, and Supervisor Cox is there, there's going to be a really big attempt to connect that border for pedestrians and cyclists so that, and there'll be a bike route from San Isidro all the way to hook into Imperial Beach and the Bayshore Bikeway. So I think that's going to be a really good economic development strategy and a really good project, not just for our residents, but also for visitors as well. So very good meeting, very productive discussion about increasing pedestrian and bicycle friendliness of the border and linking that to the rest of the South Bay. Sharon's here to talk about the Easter egg hunt. Well, no, wait, so I don't have to do that. I was on my list of things to do. Also, Captain Robert Stabenow, lifeguards, wait, Sean, is growing up in IB. I know Councilmember Pat and I started lifeguarding with him back in, we were a little bit before him, I think a year before him. And his mom passed away today. A lot of lifeguards when I was a kid spent a lot of time at his house eating a lot of food his mom cooked. So our condolences are to Robert today and his whole family. Stabenow is a big fixture at IB. For a lot of us who grew up here, so sending our best to him and his family. And should I make the announcement about the port? And make sure staff recommended. So the staff recommended that our port applications or grants be approved. So that's good news for the Cultural Arts Series, and I think it's for the fireworks. Is that right? Symphony by the Sea. Sorry. So very, very pleased to hear that, and so we'll await those announcements. I guess the full port has to review that.
Correct. I believe that'll be middle of May when they make their official announcement.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's all for me. And then any communications from city staff? Okay. Now we have the public comment period. Just again to let you know that due to the Brown Act, we can't respond to you during the public comment period, even if you would want us to. It's a non-agenda item. So The city manager will be taking notes on what you have to say, and the city manager will be taking notes as well as to get back to you with any substantive comments or answers. But I know that for those of you watching on YouTube as well, we're streaming live, to let you know that we do care, but we just can't respond as directed by the Brown Act. Also, I've noticed that a lot of meetings now in the state of California start with a discussion about actually asking the council, elected officials, and the public to turn off their phones or to silence their phones. Something I'd love to have all of you do, as well as us, to make sure we can voluntarily turn off our phones, make sure that we're focused on the meeting and we're not distracted when we are at the meeting. And with that, we'll start the public comment period. And now, Sean, sorry for the confusion. Sean Cox, please. And remember to state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Sharon Cobb, 1116 Elder Avenue, Imperial Beach, California, 91932. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to invite you all to the Imperial Beach Easter egg hunt on April 4th at 10 o'clock to 10:01 specifically, but actually you can get there around 9. I'd like for all of you to be able to attend. I wanted to personally thank the people and the organizations, our public safety, city staff, local businesses, and local families that all came together to put in money for this event, and it's really coming together nicely, and I just want to say our city rocks. Very proud to live there.
Thank you, Sharon.
And I'd like to thank Sharon for taking over this because somebody else was running it. She stepped up to the plate. Thank you.
Now we have Mary Stone.
Hi, my name is Mary Stone, and I live at 1147 5th Street here in ID. I'm here as part of a larger group of people from Imperial Beach and the surrounding areas who would like to express our concerns regarding the breakwater project at Palm and Ninth. More specifically, we would like to express our complete opposition to the developer's plans to put a grocery outlet in that location. Ideally, we'd love to see a decent grocery store like Trader Joe's in this spot. We started this group less than a week ago and already have almost 700 signatures on our petition. We also have a Facebook page with over 1,200 members. The majority of our signatures are from residents of IV, but we also have close to 100 signatures from Coronado residents with more on the way. We understand that Sudbury Properties is ultimately in control of the businesses who lease space at Breakwater. We're also aware that Trader Joe's corporate structure decides where they build venue locations. With that being said, we plan to let Sudbury know that we deserve better than a grocery outlet. We would also like to convince Trader Joe's to come back and take a second look at IB. Our city has changed dramatically in the past few years. We can and would support a decent grocery store. We neither want or need another discount store. It was amazing to see so many friends and neighbors band together so quickly and feel so strongly about this issue. IB deserves better than a grocery outlet, and we hope to have your support.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have Cheryl Perez.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Perez. I'm with Chula Vista Marine Corps League Attachment 1207 as a Forest Tax Coordinator. I am a local, state, and national officer for the Ladies Auxiliary Military Reserve Part and Chula Vista Veterans Advisory Commissioner. I'm here tonight to present information on California's Remembering Our Fallen Heroes exhibition and to ask for your support in honoring and respecting the memory of our local fallen heroes, and for your help in securing that the families from our local communities know that their loved ones will not be forgotten. Remembering Our Fallen Heroes is a traveling photo tribute to California's 710 fallen heroes who have died in combat since 9/11 and the War on Terror. This exhibition will be in Chula Vista for 12 days and is being sponsored by 5 local Chula Vista veterans organizations. The City of Chula Vista and the Chula Vista 4th Avenue Public Library, where the exhibition will be held, are coordinating the event with us. The memorial will be on display from May 3rd to May 14th during public library hours. An opening ceremony on May 4th includes a military color guard, military band, and special honoring of San Diego County and South Bay Fallen Heroes. The idea for the memorial started 4 years ago when the parents of 4 active duty soldiers published a newspaper article in which the father of a fallen soldier's pain and grief was even greater 4 years after his son Joshua had died in Iraq. He felt his son had been forgotten and the war was not over yet. This inspired them to create a traveling photo memorial with the goal of having one in each state, a mission to make sure our fallen heroes are not forgotten and remind us that there is a tremendous cost for our freedom. The eternal hope is to honor the memory of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, to provide comfort to the families and friends of the fallen, and to remind others of the tremendous cost paid by some. Its legacy will be that these men and women will never be forgotten and that their names will be remembered and spoken. It is our hope that you'll see the importance of honoring and remembering the fallen heroes that lived, grew up, and went to school in our communities. Our Gold Star families need to know that their loved ones will not be forgotten, and it is our duty as their communities to make sure they aren't. There will be a special tribute to in area to honor the fallen heroes from South Bay. Included in this tribute will be James M. Trevor, who was raised in Imperial Beach and graduated from Mar Vista High School. Army Sergeant First Class David E. Metzer, who was raised in Imperial Beach and graduated from Mar Vista High School. Metzer was one of 7 Army Special Operations Command soldiers who died when their helicopter crashed in Afghanistan in his third deployment. The team members said of him, he was someone you could count on, he was someone you want there in the heat of the battle, and you always knew he was watching your back. Also, Army Sergeant James M. Trevor. He graduated from Mar Vista High School also, where he participated in the ROTC program. He died on his first combat tour in Afghanistan when his army truck crashed into a canal. One of Trevor's last acts was to free another soldier from his seatbelt and give him his pocket of air. He knew there was not enough air for both of us to breathe, the lone surviving soldier stated. I look forward to working with you to see how we can honor these fallen soldiers from Imperial Beach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. City Manager Hall, maybe we can talk afterwards about how to publicize that on social media, even do a proclamation or some sort of acknowledgement of the event. Thank you very much. We have one last comment. Mr. William Blake, I think Blake.
Hey y'all, I'm William Blake, 1441 5th Street. A lot of you know me, some of you don't. Some of you like me, some of you don't. What I observed today on the beach was pretty disgusting. I saw the dog catcher driving on the beach between Imperial Beach Boulevard and Palm Avenue. He drove the whole way. He got out at the plaza and went around the Elm and got back on the beach. And when I questioned him in front of the lifeguard tower, I said, is this really necessary to drive on the beach? He said, oh yeah, I got to enforce the law, the dog law. And well, I looked on the beach and I didn't see any dogs. Now, if he was talking about those high school girls, I would smack him. But he didn't see any dogs nor the plaza either. So, I'm curious. In the municipal code, Section 10.36.160, it says no vehicles are allowed on the beach, ever. Please explain. Why is this guy driving on the beach?
Thank you very much. With that, we finish the public comment period of the evening. And now we have a presentation, the proclamation in recognition of Stand Up for Transportation Day. And I'll be making that presentation to Mark Olson, Public Relations Specialist for MTS. Are you here, Mr. Olson? Did you have anything to say, or do you want me to just present you to the proclamation?
You can just present me the proclamation, that's fine, but I just say a few comments about what this is all about.
Great, why don't you take the podium, please? Thank you.
Oh, Mayor, City Council, Mark Olson with the Metropolitan Transit System. Thank you very much for this opportunity and for passing this proclamation. National Stand Up for Transportation Day is really a call to action all over the nation that we're giving to Congress to pass some sort of long-term solution for federal funding for our transportation infrastructure improvement projects. Right now, they've just been kicking the can down the road with funding extensions, and what we're trying to do is get them to pass some long-term solutions. So one of the things that we're doing is, not only in San Diego, but across the nation, cities and transit agencies are making this call to Congress to pass the long-term solution. And then the other thing that we're asking people to do is people can actually voice their support with this effort by taking public transportation on April 9th. The trolley and the bus system that rides all over Imperial Beach, as well as all throughout San Diego. And actually, April 9th coincides with Padres opening day. So there's a lot of festivities going on in the downtown area. East Village is having a big block party there. There'll be 50,000 people going there. And if anybody's setting up that way, a great way to get up there is by taking the trolley. We've done a lot of improvements on the Blue Line. It's less than a half an hour from the closest stations to here. So certainly one of the things that people can do is take public transit on April 9th and help us encourage Congress to pass the long-term funding solution for our transportation infrastructure. It creates a lot of jobs for this region. And so certainly we would appreciate the support, and we definitely appreciate the support of the city council. So thank you.
Great. Mike, any comments? Or I know that a representative of the MTS, Lori Bragg, isn't here this evening, and I know this is something that means a lot to her. I know all of us who either use public transit or have family members who use public transit. I'll read this part of the proclamation. Whereas April 9th marks the Stand Up for Transportation Day, a national transportation infrastructure day that highlights successful transportation projects and the critical need to invest in our nation's transportation infrastructure, and encourages people to use public transportation. And whereas Stand Up for Transportation Day will be celebrated in small, medium, and large communities across the United States, it's a day that highlights successful transportation projects and the critical need for funding transportation infrastructure, and encourages people to use public transportation. So it be resolved that we declare this April 9th Stand Up for Transportation Day, and I'll make sure I comment that this year.
Thank you very much. Thanks again. Appreciate it very much.
Now we have a presentation on self-help CPR by Engineer Paramedic Bell. Present this item.
Okay, Tom. All right, Mayor Medina, council members, fellow citizens here in Imperial Beach, Jason Bell, engineer paramedic, Imperial Beach Fire Department, and also the EMS coordinator. And with that, I'm tasked with overseeing the delivery of medical services here in the city. This presentation is a follow-up on what we had the presentation 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting. Where we had the successful save of a citizen that was resuscitated by his wife, who gave bystander CPR prior to arrival of our crews. Bystander CPR and CPR done prior to the arrival of the fire department and the paramedics is one of the biggest keys in helping somebody survive a cardiac arrest. Cardiovascular disease, heart attacks is the #1 killer in America of citizens. It's no surprise, over 600,000 people die each year from a heart attack. Of that, almost 400,000 will have a sudden cardiac arrest. And what that is pretty much their heart goes into a state where it's no longer beating and it's no longer pumping blood to their brain to oxygenate the brain, keep the brain alive. Unfortunately, almost 90% of these occur in the home. And I'll get to that, how that ties in a little bit later in the presentation. Nationwide, bystander CPR is only about 32%. So only 3 out of 10 people are getting CPR done prior to the arrival of our crews. That's one of the first links in the chain of survival and one of the most important links because it buys us time. It keeps that heart in a state that we can try and resuscitate it with both our advanced medications and also our defibrillators. AED use, which is automatic external defibrillator use, we do have them throughout the city. I'll get into a program here in a little bit. Only about 2% of nationwide cardiac arrests get an AED use prior to the arrival of our crews. If somebody does go into cardiac arrest and have bystander CPR done and have an AED placed on them and they are shocked, that's a 40% chance that they'll be able to come back. Without that, only with bystander CPR, it's about a 9% chance. And how that ties in is for every minute that you go by without having your brain oxygenated, you lose about a 10% chance of survival. Take in normal response times from the time that you recognize that somebody's collapsed and pick up your phone, your cell phone, and call 911, you're probably looking at about 30 seconds to about a minute. If you're on the phone with 911 dispatch, it's going to be anywhere between a minute to 2 minutes. They're going to start prompting you with CPR instructions as they're toning us out for the response. Average response time in urban cities, anywhere between 4 and 6 minutes. So let's take 5 minutes as an average. Now we're looking at about 8 minutes from the time that you dial 911 to the time that we show up. So by the time the fire department and the paramedics show up, if nothing's been done, we're only shooting with about a 20% chance we'll be able to get somebody back. That's why bystander CPR and CPR training of the public is so important, as well as utilizing an AED if it's available to get somebody's heart back into an organized rhythm. The importance of CPR training can be best illustrated by King County up in Seattle, Washington area. In 2002, their CPR save rate was about 27%. At that point, they instituted a lot of system changes in their 911 system, their dispatch protocols, but the big thing is they embarked on a program to train their citizens. Since 1970, which is when their paramedic program was started, they've trained over 830,000 citizens of the Seattle area in CPR. Having that as just a great force multiplier, it extends our reach out and trying to get these people to survive. 2013 or 2013, their save rate went from 27% to 62%. A 40% chance increase in their survival rate just from the measures that they instituted. That's an enhanced 911 system, pre-arrival instructions, well-trained responders all coming together. People are more apt to have CPR performed on them in public than in their own private home. And that's the sad part, is because, like I said earlier, 88% of cardiac arrests are in the house. So that's why we need to train people, because you're more apt to do CPR on a loved one at your house than you are encounter somebody out in the public. However, the studies have shown that that's when you're more likely to act, is when you're out in public to somebody that you don't know. And they've really seen a marked increase with the teaching of just compression-only CPR, because it's helped alleviate a lot of the disease transmission fears that some people had with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Bringing this back locally, the Imperial Beach Fire Department is currently in the process of partnering with a company called Pulse Point. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors have recognized this. And what this is, it's a application that you can download on your smartphone. When you're registered, it takes the GPS signal in your phone and alerts you to when there's a nearby cardiac arrest within walking distance or within a quarter, half mile of your location via the GPS. That info is entered into by the dispatch system, and it also will pop up the location of the nearest AED. The fire department is currently going around through the public, finding out where all the AEDs or automatic defibrillators are in the city, so we can enter that information. So that information is then available to the citizens should they need to access that AED. And I'm going to show a public service announcement on how that system works here in just a little bit. CPR training that we've done, it's something that's near and dear to our hearts. Once again, the more people we train, the better chance the citizens have for survival. Last year, we trained almost 500 people in hands-on CPR throughout the year at different special events. The fire department is going to have another CPR demonstration, hands-only CPR training, the first week of June. It'll be in conjunction with National CPR Week. That information will be given to Ed for posting on the city's website and distributed through social media. As well as this Saturday at the Easter egg hunt, we'll have crews down there being able to train people in hands-only CPR. So definitely a need, 500, although it's a great number, it's only a start. In a perfect world, I'd love to have that number be about 28,000, which is roughly the population of the city. And it's only a force multiplier. It extends the greatest chance for survival of the citizens, as well allows us to have the best chance to work with the tools that we have to try and get somebody to survive a cardiac arrest, so we can have more success stories like we had 2 weeks ago. So with that, I'd like to show this quick little, I don't know what I did. I did something. At this time, the alert's gone out. People are getting alerted on their cell phones. Shows in the location of the AED. So this system is currently being used by all the major dispatch centers here in the county, including San Diego Fire Communications, which is our dispatch center. So with this, I think it only has great things to show in the future. Is there any questions?
Any questions or comments from my colleagues?
Thanks very much for the presentation. Do you have any specific recommendations for consideration on the part of the city for this kind of system, or the city council?
Other than just support of the fire department's venture into trying to force multiply this, and we have AEDs currently in all of our city buildings. There's one at the fire station, one here at City Hall, the senior center, the lifeguard station, Public Works. It's in council. It's in the city manager's office here. So I've gone out. They're also located in the schools, and we have one at the sheriff's department and the library as well. Those are county meetings. So obviously, the more that we have out in the public, the better. I think starting with the city, making sure the city is building infrastructure is covered, and then trying to get more of them out in the public. It's a task that we'll set out or try and accomplish due to the cost involved.
Thank you for your presentation. It's good to know that our city's so well staffed, and that our public safety is top notch. So thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe there's a way we can, I don't know, work, sort of leverage the fire department through the IB Collaborative and get more folks engaged. You know, we do this, maybe call it day of IB CPR Day or something.
Okay.
So we really do encourage a lot more community-based organizations to get involved in this effort. Something we can think, maybe we want to do this year or next year, or even find grant money to do that. I think it's a great idea.
Sounds great.
And, I know Councilman Patton and I are both lifeguards. We know how important CPR is, and having that training. I need to get trained, recertified. So anyway, thank you very much for all the good work you do.
No problem.
I mean,
I look forward to working with the city on that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, first, it's obvious why they keep the defibrillator in the city manager's office. But I did want to say that just last year, they retrained me in CPR, and what I was surprised with was how different it is. And so if anyone out there thinks they know CPR, it really is time to get some new training because it has changed a lot. And they go in how to use the defibrillators. And before that, I would have never even tried. I would have thought, oh, I'm not messing with this. But once you learn how to do it, it really is an important tool that we have in our community. So it really is time to get retrained. Things have changed a lot in just the last few years. Thank you for putting up with my training. I passed. I promise I have good teachers.
great. Thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah.
Now we move on to the consent calendar portion of the evening, 2.1 to 2.3. So I would like to entertain a motion to approve consent calendar items numbers 2.1 through 2.3. Is there a motion? Please vote by electronic device.
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to the public hearing section of the evening to item 4.1, consideration of resolution number 2015-7563, authorizing the city manager to execute an implementation agreement of the owner participation agreement between the City of Imperial Beach and Bikeway Village, LLC, for the development of the Bikeway Village project located at 535 Florence Street and 536 13th Street. And now we declare the public hearing open, and Assistant City Manager Wade will give the report. Thank you.
Assistant City Manager Wade is trying to get organized. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a project that's been a long time in coming, and I can pull this PowerPoint up. We'll get started. Before you today, as you stated, is the implementation agreement to an owner participation agreement with Bikeway Village LLC for the adaptive reuse of 2 commercial warehouse buildings and some significant public right-of-way improvements and public easement improvements on private property associated with the project. The rationale for, and we're recommending that the council adopt resolution 2015-7563 that would authorize the city manager to execute that agreement. The rationale being that this will provide bond proceeds from 2010 former redevelopment agency bond proceeds for their intended purpose, and the approval of an active transportation grant that was approved last year from SANDAG in the amount of $1.8 million will effectively reduce the amount of the original allocation to this project by the city council of $1,974,700, only $855,000. And that would free up approximately $1.1 million of those bond proceeds to be used for other projects in the city for their intended purpose, subject to the bond covenants. As I mentioned, this has been going on for quite some time. The owner participation agreement was approved back in January of 2012. The council approved the project site plan review and certified the environmental document in May of 2012. There's actually a state coastal permit required because the property is in original state permit jurisdiction. So an application had to be made to the Coastal Commission itself. And on June 12th, 2013, that permit was approved. And then the council approved Coastal Commission modifications associated with the approval by the city council was a local coastal program amendment and a rezoning that would allow those commercial structures, which were formerly zoned residential, to be used for non-residential and visitor serving and recreational tourism uses. And then finally, the Coastal Commission certified that land use amendment in May of 2013. I wanted to point out there was an error in the staff report that said that happened in February of 2014. It actually happened in May of 2013. After that time, the project went through the grant application, which was the subject of the delay since then. Just to reintroduce the project to the council, as well as the community. This is an aerial view of these two warehouse buildings. They're at the northern terminus of 13th Street and Florence Street. The project proposes, and by the way, the property to the north was formerly owned by the Airport Authority, and one of the efforts that the city engaged in years ago was to try to buy that property. It ended up being purchased by the developer, and so it's part of the project. The project, as I mentioned, proposes the adaptive reuse of these two warehouse structures to accommodate in the future commercial uses, retail uses, restaurant, cafe uses, and then also proposes this substantially sized patio that will be open to the public on the north side of the buildings, and an overlooking pier structure overlooking the San Diego Bay Wildlife Refuge. It also provides a new alignment and connection to the Bayshore Bikeway. The Bayshore Bikeway is right here, north is to the north. This is the recent Sellers Kiever Memorial Plaza area and outdoor educational area, and the Habitat Heroes Natural Native Plant Garden. These are the warehouse structures from the air. This is what's proposed, rendering of the project. Looking to the southeast from the Bayshore Bikeway, a little closer where the Pure Outlook structure is. Looking to the southwest and looking to the northwest. The project also proposes bicycle parking as well as public restrooms. The project is divided into two buildings, the west and the east, and there will be improvements to which will include a surface parking lot in the north area of 13th Street, and what we're calling a boardwalk or a Class 1 Bayshore Bikeway that will transition from a Class 2 bikeway into the Bayshore Bikeway, which, as we know, is a regional Class 1 bikeway facility. A part of the grant application was looking at innovative ways to accommodate bicycle traffic. And one of the proposals, and it's proposed for this project, is the concept of diagonal reverse angle parking along 13th Street between Cala and Cypress on the east side of the street. Also would be a new sidewalk there for a significant portion where today there's just a dirt shoulder. So that would greatly improve pedestrian access to the Bayshore Bikeway as well as to the project itself. And that, of course, is to the north. And here's a cross section on the west side of the street. You'd have standard parallel parking, Class 2 bike lane, the roadway, another Class 2 bike lane, and the reverse diagonal parking. The reverse diagonal parking is preferred by bicyclists in the bicycling community. It's a little more difficult and requires some maneuver for vehicles, but when a car is parked in that area, the driver is automatically looking on the south side of the vehicle, looking at bicycle traffic coming up or north in this area. So the passenger or the driver would be on this side of the car and would be able to see bicyclists rather than backing across that bike lane. So it's been implemented in other areas of the county, La Mesa, Solana Beach, and we're still compiling some statistics on how that performs. This is 13th Street, north is to the right. This is Cala up here, and this is Cypress here. Again, this is the reverse angle parking and the sidewalk that would be built as part of the project, and the Class 2 bike lanes coming up 13th Street. As I mentioned, there was an active transportation grant award of $1.8 million for the project. This is a graphic that was submitted to SANDAG for the project. Of the $1.8 million, I would mention that that's for the entire project. It was actually called the Bikeway Village Bayshore Bikeway Enhancement Project, and it wasn't specific to just Bikeway Village. It also included two portions. I don't know if you just saw that, but the northern portion up here is the Bikeway Village project, where $1.38 million of the grant funds would be allocated to it. And then the southern portion, which is a proposed and designed Class 2 bikeway facility all the way from Marine Field to connect all the way into the Bayshore Bikeway, would be paid for with grant funds of approximately $420,000. So the implementation agreement we're asking you to approve and for your consideration carries out the following city responsibility. It would provide $855,000 of bond funds, bond proceeds to the project. Through SANDAG, we would administer the $1.38 million of ATP grant funds for the project, pursuant to a grant agreement with SANDAG and the city. And we would disperse the funds periodically through construction of the project. The city, in its agreement, has a 10% withholding. It matches exactly the withholding that SANDAG with its grant funds would hold, sort of an incentive for the developer to complete the project. And that 10% would be withheld until all the eastern and western bikeway parcel improvements, as well as the off-site public improvements, are completed. The developer would also have to provide certification and verification that the costs were as submitted to the city for draws on the funds that would be allocated if approved by the council. And finally, that money would be released only upon completion of the project. The grant funds would obviously be dispersed pursuant to the grant agreement. We expect to have that grant agreement next week from SANDAG. And again, as I mentioned, the standard language in the grant agreement has a 10% withholding for each draw request. And SANDAG would pay that amount upon the request by the developer through the city. The developer responsibilities, as I mentioned, the developer acquired the bikeway parcel or the airport authority parcel. They would have to design, and they've done all the design already. They're finalizing their offsite improvement plans, but the building plans have already been approved, and install them on Florence Street, Cypress Street, and 13th Street. They would have to construct all the bicycle access pathways to the Bayshore Bikeway, the ramps, the parking area, the restrooms, and the walkways in and around the buildings. They would complete the construction to the patio and overlook pier structure. I mentioned the bathrooms, and also provide public easements for the public benefit of some of those private areas, and I'll show you those graphically in a minute here. The proposed financial assistance is $1.38 million of grant funds, as I mentioned, and $855,000 of bond proceeds for a total assistance of $2.235 million. Kaiser Marston, our economic development or economic consultant rather, has done a fiscal analysis. Anytime public funds are being provided, we do a fiscal analysis to ensure that there's no gift of public funds or that we are not creating a windfall for the developer. And I'd like to ask Paul Mara to come up and go through these next couple.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Good evening, Mayor Medina, members of the council. Yeah. We prepared the feasibility analysis of the project, and the goal was to determine the need for financial assistance. And so on the screen before you, you see a summary of the development costs. The developers already acquired both warehouses and the airport authority parcel for a total cost of about $3.4 million. And the projected development costs to both create all of the site work improvements, all the horizontal improvements around the warehouses into the airport authority parcel and a portion of 13th Street, combined with the renovation of the warehouses for their new uses. That figure is estimated to be almost $5 million. That includes indirect costs such as design. So the total development costs are estimated at $8.5 million. We looked at the economics of the project, potential tenancies, and what type of rent to be achieved. This is a very pioneering project. We all know it is highly visible to the bike path, but it's invisible to through traffic. It's not on Palm. It's not on Seacoast. It's not even on 13th. There's 4 at 13th. So developers taking significant risk in acquiring these properties, designing and entitling these properties, and then the remaining risk now is the lease-up risk. So considering that, we estimate the maximum private investment that can be justified is about $5.2 million. That's looking at the achievable rent and occupancy. And therefore, we estimate a gap of just about $3.2 million. That's the estimated shortfall. So then we also looked at the value of what the developer will be required to provide to the city. What are the public benefits? And as Mr. Wade mentioned, the developer has several obligations. One is to physically improve the public rights of way with streetscape and parking and other beautification improvements. And the other is to do the same on portions of the private property and give you easements for those portions of the property. So we valued those gives from the developer. We valued them based on their corresponding costs and a corresponding value for the portion of the acquisition that correlated to those private portions of the property. And so we value that a total of $2.8 million that the developer is contributing to the city through doing these things. So in conclusion, the proposed financial assistance combination of your bond proceeds and the SANDAG grant is $2.2 million. The financing gap that we determined for the project is you could justify a contribution of $3.2 million. So you're giving the developer 2.2 against a need of 3.2. So clearly less than the justified gap. And then you can also make a comparison between your financial assistance and the value of the public benefits. You're providing 2.2 million and the benefits are valued at 2.8 million rounded. So there's really two tests, both tests with significant difference. And in fact, the developers accepting a lower return than we assumed in our analysis because you're not able to fill the whole financing gap for the project. So I'll pass the presentation back to Mr. Wade. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. The economic subsidy report, legislation last year, AB 562, now requires, sort of in the wake of redevelopment dissolution, an economic 33433 report, we used to call it, summary report of economic benefit. That report again was Marston. Although the project projected sales tax with the types that they are making discussions with will be approximated at $76,000 for a total annual benefit to the city of $93,000, and those are expressed in future dollars. Additionally, the project as proposed initially and as approved by the Coastal Commission contemplates in the west building a type of hostel facility, and that, of course, if moved forward, would provide transient occupancy tax to the city at an as yet undetermined amount. The public easement grants that we've spoken of. This is a site plan that shows the different areas for which grants of public easement pursuant to the agreement would be provided by the developer to the city. There are several types of agreement or easement areas rather. Public access areas or public access easements are areas 1A, 2A, 4, 5, and 8A, and they'll be shown in the red. 1A, 2A, 4, 5, which accommodates bicycle parking and bicycle access to the Bayshore Bikeway, and 8A, which is, I don't know if you saw that come up over here, this area. These are areas that are private property that would have easements over them for the public to use to access the property. There's also an open space easement. This was required by the Coastal Commission in their approval of their coastal permit, and that is area 6 in the northeast corner of the site. That's essentially a habitat buffer area since it's some sensitive habitat. They asked for that to be set aside as open space in perpetuity. There's also access to the structure in the form of the patio and the pier overlook. That's area 7. And the agreement says that a minimum of 25% of that area would be dedicated to public use. The developer has proposals to use that or potentially use that for outdoor dining for a restaurant or cafe. And so that would be subject to other limitations such as alcohol beverage control requirements or areas of control for a restaurant. And so we have identified a 25% easement. And the public residence, which in this diagram show them right here, is area 9. We do have a recent floor plan that would show that area as right in that general area. That's an updated floor plan. And the area that we've discussed, although it hasn't been fixed, for this public easement in Area 7 on the outside area and on the pier structure shown in the, looks like blue to me. There has been environmental review conducted for the project. That was a mitigated negative declaration that was routed for public review. We did have comments from 3 agencies which were responded to and included in the final MND. And the final MND conducted its review period, 30-day. There were no comments received. And the final MND, although it did identify some potentially significant environmental effects in areas of biological resources, cultural resources, hazardous materials and noise, they've all been reduced to a level of insignificance by mitigation measures that have been applied, or would be applied with the development of the project, rather. And the final M&D was approved by the council on May 2nd, 2012. In considering this implementation agreement, the council has options. One is to adopt the staff recommendation and approve resolution 2015-7563. The other would be to consider modification of the bond proceeds allocated to the project, which, as I mentioned, have been significantly reduced by virtue of the grant award. Modify the conditions in the implementation agreement, if any, under which we provide those bond proceeds to the city, or sorry, to the developer, should the council approve this agreement, or continue the item and request additional information from either the developer or the city. I would like to mention that the developer's representative, Mr. Terry McCaleb, is in the audience, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions, as is their contractor, Terry Arnett, if you have any questions for him. We also have special counsel Kendall Levan in the audience. I would like to point out that we handed out a last-minute agenda item which contains several what we consider insubstantial edits to the documents that were originally provided. If you would like to go over those, we can. We've summarized those and we can go over those with you. We do not consider them dramatic changes, but again, if the council opts to go through that, we'd be happy to go through that. There is obviously the option of denial of this resolution. Our recommendation, once again, is to adopt the resolution and authorize the city manager to execute the implementation agreement to the OPA for this project. Thank you.
Great, and now we have, oh, sorry.
Yes.
City Manager Hall.
If I could just make one clarification, the funding for this project are tax exempt bonds that were issued to the former redevelopment agency, and they will be refunded through the incremental increase in property values that will occur as this project proceeds. So I wanted to clarify that none of the monies will come from the general fund to pay these bonds. So it's not going to impact anything like public safety or any of the other things that the city council is trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to make it clear that these bonds will not affect the general fund.
Great, thank you, Assistant City Manager Wade. That was an excellent report. And now we have the public comment period. I only have one public comment slip. Any other slips? Or so we have Zeke Mazur, who's IB's #2 cyclist. We actually have IB's #1 cyclist standing in the back. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm Zeke Mazur. I live at 522 7th Street, and I ride around the bay regularly, so I know it pretty well. And I'm really excited about this project. However, I didn't see any real clear elevations. I was kind of thinking those block buildings were 2 stories, and then the upper story would have that view platform. And I was really hoping that the view platform could go over the bike path, and that would provide temporary shelter from the sun and maybe the rain, if we have rain. The bikeway goes over many bridges. It goes over the Gordy Shield Bridge between National City and Chula Vista, 2 iron bridges just to the east of this project. It would be nice to have a bridge actually go under. And I'd like an estimate of the approximate cost of the overnight stay at the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Would you like to address those questions? Or?
Yes, if you don't mind, the Mayor and Council, the structures are single story. They're warehouse structures. And the pier structure, you'll notice in front of the pier structure, there's a significant open space area that is native vegetation. It's going to be a detention area for stormwater runoff. going to be somewhat of a demonstration garden, if you will. In reviewing the project with resource agencies, there was significant concern about providing an ample setback from the Otay River and the San Diego Bay Wildlife Refuge. They really wanted to limit where the structure, if you will, and by structure in this case, I mean the patio and the pier. So its location is about as far northward as the developer was allowed to go. So they really wanted to minimize the intrusion of structure towards the Bayshore Bikeway. And that's where it is today. There's also some cultural resource issues associated with the property that will have to be mitigated during construction, which also limits the amount of construction that can go on in some of those areas. So for those reasons, the project is designed in its current configuration.
I think there's a question about the cost of the.
Oh, I'm sorry, the cost. At this point, there hasn't been any pro forma. I know the developer, and maybe they could speak to this, they have solicited input from a variety of different hostile operations. That's hostile operations. And at this point, they don't have an agreement with one. And so I really couldn't speculate, but the idea would be that it would be a lower cost accommodation. And again, at this point, they haven't pro-formed it because they don't have a real viable.
Great, thank you. Do we have comments from Councilmember Patton? Thank you.
So this is a very popular project for Sandag. When I go to their meetings, they have a lot of big projects going on, and this is well known throughout the county. And people are always talking about it. As I look at the picture, a little boxy. I know we're dealing with two big boxes, but a little boxy. And I think it's real important that we keep the landscaping maintained as approved. Not 3 or 4 years later, we have one flower left. So I think it's real important that we make sure they keep the landscaping as throughout with their native vegetation. And then one more thing on the employment. I understand the 21 temporary employment, and they have the possibility up to 81 full-time positions. Can you elaborate on that at all?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that, Councilmember Patton, but they are projected from anticipated tenants such as a restaurant, bike shop, cafe, and I believe a gym type of or CrossFit type of facility. So those are the initial projections, and maybe even Mr. Mara might have some input as to how those numbers are generated, and it might also be based purely on square footage of the facilities.
Well, yeah, it is. With 3 jobs for 1,000 square feet.
Council member, that's correct. We're using a really industry rule of thumb because the uses are restaurant, retail, or hostel, something across that blend, ranging from coffee shop to bike shop to brewery. And some are more intensive employment than others. Restaurant and any kind of food service is more intensive. So we're using 3 per 1,000 as a typical average. And if it were heavily food, that would be a low estimate. And obviously, if it were heavily CrossFit type uses, that would be a high estimate.
So let me ask you, I know it's early in the game, but have you had anybody approach you saying, we want this place, we would like?
I think the developer can speak to the leasing effort. Do you want to come up? Sure.
That'll be my last question.
If I could, while he's walking up there, I wanted to point out that the grant application, in response to your comment about Sandag, it was a statewide grant application, Caltrans administered, ATP. And if you weren't awarded funds through it, then you went to a local NPO or Sandag and it's local competition. This project wasn't awarded money at the state level, but at the local level, it placed second in the county of all the projects that were awarded.
My name's Terry McKeown, and I'm part of the Bikeway Village project. We've talked to number of different tenants, potential tenants, but it's really, really difficult until we have a start date and the estimated finish date for them to zero in, because a lot of them won't even spend planning time until they know it's a real deal and they can move forward. So that's kind of where we're at right now with tenants. We've talked to numerous, and we're using a pretty well-known real estate broker for placement.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sprigg.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Terry Arnett with TSA Contracting. We're actually employing quite a few people, obviously, on the construction project itself, and locally based contractors here within Imperial Beach and throughout San Diego County.
Councilmember Sprigg, do you have questions for the developers?
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And congratulations on, hanging in there with this project with all the approvals and the delays and the complex financing and all of that. This is an exciting project, and it's exciting because it's not on the beaten path, so to speak. It's on the beaten bike path, but it's not on the beaten vehicle path that we always talk about for our projects here. And we'll be talking at length about the Palm Avenue Master Plan project, which is a big one. So it's very exciting, and I have to say, on a personal note, that it's looking at and working on this project over the years on the city council that it's just made me decide to start riding a bike. So thank you very much. I can't wait to actually see this facility. One of the points made by Mr. Mazur is shade for bikers. I have a bunch of questions, and two of them have to do with your thinking as developers. The first one is that point, which just occurred to me today, that as somebody who bikes a lot, Mr. Mazur knows what it's like to not have any shelter. And it looks like the only way to get shelter for this project to work is providing shelters for people to, rack their bike and sit under one of those tables that are shaded. Is there any way that factor can be brought into consideration? Because we do get a lot more sun than rain, in our area here.
Yes, there's obviously some more overhangs that you can barely see, obviously on the patio area, and then obviously with the umbrellas that are planned for the patio area. So on the, I guess there's the east and west side, there's some of those structures that for the entrances to the units itself. I'm sure we could discuss other types of shade capabilities, maybe in the public area on the patio.
Could make the project more attractive as a stopping point.
Maybe just add more umbrellas. You can see that there's a picture of the umbrellas and the state structures on the east and the west side of the project.
We were encouraged early on to keep the view corridor as open as possible as well, so it kind of becomes a little bit of a dance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Another challenge, we made some of the same comments initially, and one of the challenges being this close to a sensitive habitat area, and it's a constant challenge, is providing raptor purchase. And so for that reason, that's why there's no tall trees, there's no lights, tall lights, there's low level lights, and there's no tall structures beyond the face of the building other than these awnings.
The second question to you is, this project is a little risky in the sense of, you build it, will they come? The Kaiser Marston estimate of sales tax revenues of $76,000 to the city is, that's a pretty significant amount of sales tax. Which, what's your thinking about when you're going to get up to that level of customer sales, and what's your thinking about how this, are you going to get that amount of traffic? I mean, I think it's a great project and that you will, given the traffic around.
I think a lot of it's going to depend on our initial tenants that maybe have a draw that's going to bring them with them. And we're hoping sooner than later because we're making a big investment. So So, you know, until we get the tenant base in place, and then there's ways to promote it and different things that we already have in mind. But until we get the tenant base in place, it's a big risk. And that, you know, we've had a few sleepless nights.
Yeah. Well, we're sure going to wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I think the input from, it was previously Cassie Turley that was recently purchased, they're the retail broker. And they're, the team on this project is one of the top in the county itself, Michael Burton and Pasquale. And they're like, we do a lot of policing in downtown San Diego. I feel like there's a lot of capabilities here. And I think some of the tenants have looked for the construction to start in order to feel like, hey, this is a real project.
Well, I think one of the things that is going to help you as we, the council is going to be thinking more about strategic kinds of issues and planning going into the future and how we market ourselves as a community, and the whole question of marketing Imperial Beach more as an ecotourism haven, a haven for bicyclists and for birders and that sort of thing can only help you. And so once we get that rolling, I think a bit more than we are right now, and it'll come on stream hopefully around the same time as your project comes on stream. I did have a couple more questions for Mr. Wade. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Just the math of the project, of the numbers, is kind of interesting. Originally, we were going to put about 1.9 million bond proceeds into the project, and that was going to be the city's contribution to the project. That was replaced, so stop me if I'm wrong as we go here. That was replaced by 1.8 million in grants, plus an $855,000 city matching share to get the grant. Okay. So when you add those two together, you actually have more than the original 1.9, which was going to be the city's share. So I guess my question is, did something increase in terms of the scope or cost of the project to absorb those additional city share funds, so to speak?
No. I mean, obviously, with time, costs of construction increase, and that has happened. This project always demonstrated a needed gap. The 1.9, a little north of 1.9 million of bond proceeds we originally allocated, there was significant potential acquisition costs associated with that of the bikeway or the airport authority property. And after the developer acquired that property, one of the challenges that any agency has is how to infuse those funds into the project, because we're really limited in terms of what private improvements we can provide. And so the acquisition costs at this point are limited to the grants of easement that we identified, the public benefit on private property. The 1.9 million has been effectively reduced to 855. And that was because we were awarded a $1.8 million grant. That $1.8 million grant is for the entire enhancement project, 13th Street, all the way from Greenfield up to and including Bayshore the Bikeway Village project. So as I mentioned, 1.38 of that grant award is specifically for this project. Added with the 855, the total contributed funds to this project are 2.235 million. And as Mr. Morrow went over, that's still below what the needed gap would be. This developer is investing in the community. It's a real interest of the developer to do this project, and they're convinced that it will be successful. The amount of increase, we'd always anticipated applying for grants. In fact, we did apply for one unsuccessfully initially. Came close, but weren't awarded a grant. So we'd always hoped to defray the amount of bond revenue proceeds rather that went to the project. So the costs haven't changed all that much. The project always demonstrated a need to fill a gap, and still demonstrates that gap. But we've actually, our view of it, the city's view is that we've increased the contribution from 1.9 to 2.2.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, and whether or not that represents cost escalation or some additional elements of the project, because we haven't really talked about
It's simply the grant award, and when we were identifying project costs that we thought we could fund with public money, we came up with a $1.8 million request for grant funds and a local match of our bond proceeds of $855. We didn't think at the time, and as it turns out, there's still an additional gap, but we didn't think we could get much beyond that without funding, by funding just public improvements and acquisitions of easements. So that's what we were limited by, and that's basically where we are.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm asking you the question in the right way. So we've gone from 1.9, north of 1.9 as you put it, to 2.2 for the city's contribution to the project. I don't know that developer equity has changed enough, but that's roughly $300,000 more in costs that we're going to cover now with the grant than we were going to cover before the grant on this project, the north part of the project. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, is what is the addition? I mean, the project was designed at a certain level with a certain contribution, and now there's additional funding going into it.
Well, I would say that, I guess there's two ways to answer that. Nothing substantially has changed. We could have, back in 2012, awarded more grant funds, or I'm sorry, bond funds to the project. We were limited by what was available in terms of bond funds. The project demonstrated a need, even at that time, of more than 1.974. We had other projects for which bond proceeds were being proposed, and that was the amount we felt we could contribute to this project, and that's what was up to that amount. It was always up to, so there was the potential that we'd always have less provided to the project. And there aren't any additional costs. The costs have hovered around, just for construction, not acquisition of the parcels, around 4.9 million, from about 4.5 to 4.9 million for the last couple of years. So there really isn't an added cost that we're funding, other than having been given this grant. We now can afford to give more to the project to help fill the gap that is demonstrated by the economics. And as Mr. Maher said, that gap could go up to 3.2 million. Part of the rationale, and when we approved the OPA, at that time, the proposal was for tenants associated with the project. Right now, we view the project primarily as a public benefit project, and it's the developer's responsibility to secure tenants. So because we're funding primarily a public benefit project and not supporting future users at this point, that would, at least in staff's mind, justify a reduction of the city's contribution. 1.8 million is specifically for active transportation improvements, and the 855 can be for, imagine those 855 is going primarily to the public or the private public benefit portions of the project. And I think if we had a project that was fully leased, or letters of interest that had demonstrated economic return to the city of beyond what we're looking at, that might justify a greater contribution of bond proceeds.
Okay. My overall impression from your very detailed explanation is that the project financing for this project, it has got, it's not fixed. There's some variability in there, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. And as I look at the structure, if there, because we put these additional funds into the project now, there's also the structure of the project where the developer is responsible for any additional costs or overruns. Related to that, there's also a provision that the developer is subject to 10% holdback at the end in terms of reimbursement of costs, even with respect to the completion of the portion of the project the developer is not responsible for. At least that's the way I read the OPA, the agreement, or the description of the agreement. So there's the 13th Street portion of the project, which the city's, some of the grant funds are going towards. And there's the northern part of it, which the developer is responsible for. But all the funds aren't going to be dispersed for the entire project, including the developer's part, until the whole thing is certified as complete. Which kind of, I just wonder whether that's fair for the developer to be held hostage to the completion of portions of the project that are outside of its responsibility, if that's really the structure.
And I guess with the grant funds, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. They are subject to the 1.38 of grant funds that would have a 10% withholding until completion only of their portion of the project. The 420 that's allocated south of Cypress, that would be on its own construction schedule, and that the city would be administering that construction. So the city will have to deal with the withholding of that 10%. We put in a 10% withhold of the bond proceeds allocated strictly to this project, the 855, simply as a way to incentivize the developer to complete projects. We did remove a bond requirement, and the sort of the trade-off was, okay, we'll withhold a small amount to make sure the project gets built. And maybe I'm having difficulty expressing it, but I don't know that the cost is variable. Any cost in the project is going to be slightly variable, but they have provided a very detailed budget and a cost estimate, and the project costs are fixed. There may be overruns. There's contingency built into that estimate and into the project budget, and our amount is fixed. And as I mentioned, we believe that the 2.235 is a fair provision of public subsidy, even though it undershoots the gap of 3.2 million by $1 million. We still think it's a fair contribution, and the developer has agreed to make up that gap with his own equity and or construction loans. That's their choice, and they're going to do that. And we're very supportive of this developer, and we believe it's a project that can be successful.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for that report. I thought the staff report was really well laid out. My feeling about development recently in Imperial Beach is it's really met a lot of unmet demand, and I think my philosophy now, after looking at what's happened with Felipe's, the Pier South at C-180, and then the Coronado Brewery, is that if you build it, they will come. And more importantly, those have been excellent businesses with a really good business model, excellent service that have really sort of fulfilled a need in the community, and also for people outside IB. Also to see what Annie and Craig have done with K-Pasta and how popular that is. It's been a little harder for them, but that's a great project and restaurant that's always full. And the folks at El Cilantro on 13th as well, this did a recent update, and it's that project, that restaurant's full as well. So I think after having been here yesterday, and then I took my father-in-law and sister-in-law from Wisconsin, we took the bike ferry, or the ferry, across the bay, and to see the dozens of, not hundreds of bicyclists that are using that Bayshore Bikeway with $3,000 to $5,000 bikes. And I think all of us who ride bikes know that bicyclists love to clump in groups. They love to stop somewhere and have a cup of coffee or some sort of drink in the middle of the ride, and they love to hang out and drink a beer at the end of the ride. And this is something that's going to be, there's nothing else like this in San Diego County. I'm not sure there's anything else like this in all of Southern California. This will be a destination landmark for the region and for IB, and I'm looking forward to using it. But I think it's going to be, I'm looking forward to having some quality tenants, but I think it'll be really, really successful. And having been biking at that location since I was a kid before the Bayshore Bikeway, I'm really looking forward to having these amenities here. So anyway, so thank you. With that, there's no more discussion. So I'm, without the sanction of the City Council, I'm closing the public hearing. And I would like to entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2015-7563, authorizing the city manager to execute an implementation agreement, the approved owner participation agreement between the City of Imperial Beach and Bikeway Village LLC for development of the Bikeway Village project. Is there a motion? Please vote.
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Now we have the report section of the evening. Report 5.1, City Council Briefing Number 5, Palm Avenue Mixed Use and Commercial Corridor Master Plan Update. And once again, Assistant City Manager Wade will give the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is, as you mentioned, the 5th council briefing on the Palm Master Plan, Commercial Mixed Use Corridor. Staff's recommendation is to receive the briefing and provide input as necessary. The rationale is that frequent input from the council and to the public, providing these briefings can allow the public and the council to see the project and the progress being made. Options are, you can provide specific direction on any aspect of the project that we talk about tonight, including the potential relinquishment and the study of relinquishment for State Route 75. Request additional information to be provided at the next briefing. And we'll get on to the most recent work that was accomplished. It was a workshop that took place on January 15th, 2015. It was a Thursday right here in the community center. We had quite a bit of participation. There was at least 48 people in attendance, 48 signed in. I think there was a few more than that. We did show the traffic visual simulation videos that we showed to the council and received input. And then we had a presentation and received input on an interactive time of the workshop. You see the image in the lower right where the participants were asked to provide their input on various urban design elements, including landscaping, planting, street furnishings, lighting, and paving, as well as crosswalks, which was under the paving. Just to summarize some of the input, there was, in the landscaping, there was quite a bit of preference for Mexican fan palms and canary palms. The bioswale understory, they wanted some color that was available in those plant materials. Same with the bioswale understory, they wanted native grass plantings. Canopy trees, they were partial to the two on the right with less color. But for the flowering accent trees, they unanimously supported, that's known as a pink trumpet tree. And for the bioswale trees, also the pink flowering tree. Street furnishings, there was a number of elements that we looked at, including benches, trash receptacles, and bike racks. The benches that they identified were sort of the wavy element benches, or something that almost borrows from both the woody or surf henge elements. It's interesting, this bench kind of borrows from each of those elements. In terms of trash receptacles, they unanimously favored sort of a concrete or sand appearance finish. And for the bike rack, sort of a wave bike rack. I will also mention that none of these are fixed yet in design, but these are some of the comments and feedback we received. As far as paving, we looked at sidewalks and crosswalks and intersections. There was a preference for kind of standard sidewalks and pavers, small scored sidewalks and pavers in the crosswalks, as well as some key intersections to be having some sort of unique design element. Lighting, we presented traditional, thematic, and contemporary lighting. There was really no support for contemporary lighting, favoring traditional or thematic or coastal and nautical type of lighting. As I mentioned, a big part of this effort will be a discussion and evaluation by this city council on a potential relinquishment of the State Route 75. We have been in contact with Sandex Caltrans as recently as last Monday. Staff met with them. They have done their initial or preliminary study of the roadway, where they go out and walk every foot of that roadway and identify improvements that they feel are necessary to bring the road to a state of good repair. They were careful to say it's not up to current standard or highway design manual standard, but up to a state of good repair. As I mentioned, we did meet with staff to look at preliminary drawings and discuss the PSSR, the project scope study report. And staff's next task is to, with our traffic engineering and our engineering consultant on this consultant team, walk the roadway ourselves and identify things that might have been missed, in our opinion. And that would be presented back to Caltrans for their consideration. At this point, no cost estimate has been provided. It was a little bit of a surprise to me personally that the way this will work is until we reach agreement on what the improvements would be, that would be the point at which they would assign a cost estimate. They have said, however, that part of the cost estimate, this would be a financial contribution only scenario. That would be one in which if the council elected to take the roadway, Caltrans would essentially write a check for that contribution to bring it to a state of good repair. Also included in that would be maintenance costs for a period of 10 years. This is the plan set, the preliminary plan review. The cross-hatched area on the street is showing an overlay of the entire roadway, and then they've identified where there's new ADA ramps. If you see a little area right here, that's basically sidewalk patching. So we had a little bit of concern with that. This shows some signalization improvements at Florida. However, as recently as this afternoon, we were initially informed that they felt that was a permit condition of approval for a related permit, but that's not the case. So they're saying that no signalization improvements would happen there. The blue shows conditions from private development. The breakwater project is going to be required to upgrade the nodes of this median and reconfigure that median for a bigger turning pocket. And so those are shown in blue. And essentially that wouldn't be factored into the cost because that's going to be the condition of approval or construction costs borne by the breakwater project. And then moving into this area, showing off again all the roadway being reconfigured. Some sidewalk infill handicap ramps. And then this is the only area of roadway where they aren't proposing to do an overlay, as they said that's recently been upgraded. And again, this is a project condition extending the deceleration lane and turn pocket for the proposed Bernardo Shores project. One thing I wanted to point out that was brought up in one of the council briefings last summer is that the city already provides quite a bit of cost for the maintenance of State Route 75 pursuant to a maintenance agreement we've had with Caltrans, I keep making that mistake, since the 70s, I believe it is. The areas of cost are included in this table, and our annual costs are approximately $95,000, $96,000. Caltrans has provided us their summary of the last 4 years and their annualized maintenance costs by category of safety, preservation, and service. And the 4-year total has been $126,000 or an annualized cost of $31,355. A little bit concerning is that they've identified this as the estimate by which their 10-year maintenance would be proposed. So that's a little bit of a concern, obviously. But we do have our numbers to show them in terms of what costs on a regular routine basis may be required. The other thing I'd like to point out with the conversations we've had with Caltrans is that there are some under or subground improvements that storm drain catch basin improvements that our public works staff is aware of and will identify. They seem willing to consider those. And as you know, we've been in discussions with the Navy about the Coastal Campus project and implementing some of the signalization upgrades, and we intend to take a careful look at where those might be required as we study the roadway ourselves. And that's the city's annual cost in comparison. A draft mitigated negative declaration has been prepared for this project. It is going to be circulated for public review in early this month. Although it's not a requirement of CEQA for an MND, our staff and our consultant team believe that in the interest of community outreach that we want to conduct a MND public review workshop. So we'll be doing that later this month to give people a chance to actually come to a meeting and provide comments on the mitigated negative declaration so they can be included and responded to in the environmental document. And as I mentioned, our recommendation is that, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Our recommendation is that the council receive this report and provide any input as necessary. Thank you.
I don't have any public comment and comments from council. Yeah. Councilmember Patton.
So is there a, if we did go into this, is there a hurry to get this? Is there a timeline that this has to get done?
No, there's a timeline on the grant. This is funded primarily by a Smart Growth Incentive Program grant. Our schedule has us completing the work by August of this year. We're on schedule to do that because Caltrans has identified elements of the master plan that the MND is based on that do not meet their highway design standards. They've agreed to provide a letter simply stating that the project, there would have to be a relinquishment of the right-of-way, and Caltrans would not object to the project if that occurred. So that's going to happen. But as far as the timing goes, the MND will be circulated for review. We'll take our comments, and in terms of implementation, we'd still have to investigate how that could be accomplished. And the real issue is, of course, the study, which they've said will be completed by June. So we'll have a cost estimate hopefully at the next council briefing. But I don't believe there's any hurry at this point because we've got a few months yet to get the work completed under the grant. And then it's just a matter of whether what happens with the discussion about relinquishment.
There's so many unknowns. Going into this project, like going into an ice cold pool slowly. And one thing that caught me was the things that might have been missed category. And you talked about some of those things, but I mean, that's huge. Like anything that might be underground that you're looking at that could catch us, underground wiring, fiber optics, maybe what's going to be in the future on Palm Avenue, resurfacing, and then looking at what's our budget, excuse me, year 15, year 20, year 25, and how we kind of figure all that out. So, and then of course the signals. I think everybody wants the signals to work like quickly and without sitting for 5 minutes. So I know I threw a lot at you, so take what you want, throw back.
I was just going to absorb. I didn't know that I was going to throw back anything. No, those are good comments. And like I said, a big part of this task, the next step for staff is to walk that roadway and go over it with a fine-tooth comb. And we have a very valuable asset in our public works director who's been here for some years, and he's intimately familiar with that state highway and where some of those deficiencies might be. We've got a consultant who's been working on that roadway now for several years. And we've got a traffic engineering consultant who's also very familiar with that roadway. I don't sense from Caltrans staff that they're unwilling to consider reasonable requests for improvement. In fact, I think they are, because they are looking at getting rid of these rights of way, these state highways, I think they really have a vested interest in doing right by the city. Now, what that means, I can't tell you, but they are very interested in it. So on one hand, while one staff member is sort of pulling the reins back, you have another staff member saying, hey, we really want to work with you on this. So you're right. Those unknowns can't be accounted for, even if we do identify some of them. Our hope is to provide for the long term. it would be staff's challenge and objective to give the council the information necessary to be assured or reasonably assured that if they take right of way, that the city is in position to maintain it.
Councilmember Spriggs.
Thanks, Mr. Wade, for the presentation. You've heard my concerns about the project before. In the report, you didn't mention the amount of money that might be coming to the city as a result of relinquishment if this was added to our roadways. I'm not sure what the source would be, whether it's Transnet funds or could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because that would be another offsetting revenue source, and I just don't have any idea how much that would be.
I appreciate that comment, Councilmember Spriggs. We haven't estimated that. There are funds that we get routinely, and I think Hank could probably better tell you. There are funds such as Transnet or gas tax that are provided on a per per lineal foot of roadway. I don't believe we get those funds for the state highway, so theoretically, if we absorbed it into our street system, that would increase the amount of allocation. Now, I'm stating it very sort of generically, but we haven't done that calculation, and if you'd like us to try to estimate what that might be, that would definitely be something we would be happy to come back and provide you.
I think that would be very important for our overall factual consideration when we have the next meeting where we're talking about the pros and cons of relinquishment, because that'll be part of the balance sheet, the pros and the cons. So I think that a good estimate there, as good as you can make, would be very helpful. You had mentioned also that Caltrans would not have objections to our proceeding along the lines of the Sandag work you've done, funded work you've done so far, if we receive relinquishment from Caltrans of the road, of Route 75. I wonder how true that can be taken, given the strong concerns that Caltrans has expressed about the side roads that are fundamental, and the narrower throughway lanes, which might not be able to manage the truck traffic that Caltrans thinks they should be able to manage, and particularly with regard to concerns that may be raised by the Navy regarding this as a thoroughfare for, and indeed their only land thoroughfare off of the North Island for their heavy equipment. So my question is it realistic for us to think that relinquishment is all there is to it and we can pretty much do what we want? Or are we going to face other constraints that we're not aware of right now? And I'm not sure that we'll be aware of them. I'm hoping that we will identify these before we come back again in June with the discussion about relinquishment. It just, and this has been raised before by various people, including members of the public, expressing concerns that, can we really do to Route 75 what this plan says we'd like to do? Essentially turn it into almost a city street, or a quasi-city street and a main street instead of a thoroughfare, the way it is right now. Will there be other factors that will prevent us from doing that and from fulfilling this vision of what Palm Avenue could be?
That's always a difficult question to answer, but I probably oversimplified my comments when I said that in their analysis or their letter in response to the MND, they would essentially they'd provide a letter that would say there are elements of the project as proposed that do not comply with the State Highway Design Manual. However, and in order for the project to proceed, the right-of-way would have to be relinquished. That doesn't mean that Caltrans would still not be involved in the review process of any implementation of the plan. Let's say it were to be implemented all at once. They'd still, keep in mind, have control of San Diego's portion of the right-of-way. They'd still have control of Coronado's portion of the right-of-way. However, I should point out that both the city of San Diego has recently requested initiation of a study of their section, commensurate with their study of the roadway with their own consultant under a community-based transportation planning grant. So they've launched into that process as well. And it's Caltrans' desire to get rid of that entire state route from I-5 all the way across the Coronado Bridge. That said, Caltrans would still necessarily be involved in terms of the review of projects adjoining their rights of way if they still had control of them. My understanding is that if we took the relinquished right of way, that we could dictate design standards. Caltrans would comment. They may comment that there might be some transitional issues from one segment of the roadway to the Caltrans controlled segment of the roadway. But my understanding is they would not be involved you would not submit an encroachment permit to Caltrans for that work. It would go through our own review process. And so while I won't say that they won't be involved, I will say that the process for permitting would not go through them. Now, as a courtesy review, they would review the plans for their connection to the roadway. And my guess is, yes, they would make comments and we would likely try to respond to those comments. So I think it's a little bit of both is the answer to your question. They would be involved to the extent they would be involved in dictate design is a question I can't completely answer at this point, but my understanding is once the right of way belongs to a city, they review the project, they can impose their standards, but that doesn't mean we can ignore rights of way that are controlled by Caltrans that connect to that roadway.
The other brother or sister gorilla to Caltrans is, of course, the Navy, and whose influence on this community is significant. And I wouldn't think we'd want to do something that they strongly objected to, but I don't know how that would play out. I know that there's an interest there in this thruway being as much a thruway as possible. There could be congressional pressures one way or the other if we wanted to do something that would constrict military use of the road in an emergency excessively. I don't know, but I think we have to be cognizant of the issues that could haunt us if we were to accept relinquishment along with its costs, because we wanted this vision of Palm Avenue to be fulfilled, and then find that we can't do it anyway because of these various factors. So I just throw that out because I think that this community likes the design. There's no plan B for the design, which would give us a part of what we want, but still leave it with Caltrans. So it's kind of an all or nothing. And I feel a little, given that the community likes this so much, as evidenced in the workshops, I feel that we are going to be under a little bit of political pressure to go along with it, even if it's going to cost the city more because of the strong preference for the changes that are going to be very positive for Imperial Beach. So I just throw that out because I think we still have a long way to go before we can look at all the factors and analyze them in terms of what's in our long-term best interest with regard to that road. Because once we take it, it's ours. Underground barnacles or further problems with other jurisdictions who have an interest in what the changes might be or whatever. There's lots of things that we will have to take into consideration. So those are my comments, and I look forward to your coming back in June with, or whenever it is when we get all the details regarding the relinquishment choices, after this grant is finished. Thanks a lot for the work.
And just one last thing, Caltrans likes to kind of dictate the speed. And that's something else we need to look at. I don't think that was mentioned. So I'm sure that falls in that gray area.
Well, they've dangled that as yet another piece of fruit, which is you take the roadway, you don't have to listen to our speeds. You do your own traffic surveys and identify the speed. So hopefully they're true to their word if that were ever to come to pass. But and one comment I would like to make about the Navy is that we presented the project to them, to their liaison, both the new one and Bruce Schaefer, who still works with the Navy. They've never expressed any significant concerns with respect to any needs for vehicle sizes being compromised by what's proposed, by the transport of any heavy vehicles. That has not been expressed to us, and we've specifically asked that question. And they've also been very willing to, because it's identified in their EIS that their mitigation is to improve the signalization, phasing, and timing on the roadway. They've expressed a willingness to help us do that. So that's a partner I think that we'll definitely look to in terms of whatever happens on this roadway. Even if no project happens, I think everybody agrees that a new look and upgrading of that system is needed.
Okay. Councilor Pell. Yeah, I think this is great. Thank you for that presentation, all those excellent questions. Up at the League of California Cities meeting, and that I attended with Councilmember Bragg after the election, this was a major subject of discussion. I think the feeling was that Caltrans does want to do this throughout the state, and that Imperial Beach could be among the first cities to do this. I think for me, it reminds me of when my wife and I used to rent. Couldn't afford to pay very much for a house in IB, and we have landlords who weren't really interested in maintaining our house, but would tell us how lucky we are that the roof worked and we had windows and a front door. If you look historically at what Caltrans has historically underinvested in Imperial Beach, I'm not even sure that $30,000 a year is an accurate statement. So I think you can flip that both ways and say that ultimately, do we trust our economic future and the future of our region to Caltrans, an agency that literally can't even paint crosswalks on Palm Avenue? I'd be willing to believe that Caltrans would be a good partner for our future if I could we could get them to paint a single crosswalk from Rainbow on Highway 75 all the way down to actually Saturn in San Diego. And they keep telling us all the reasons why they can't paint a crosswalk. And so I guess I actually think that if we come together as a community and really use Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins, who's the most powerful person in Sacramento besides Governor Brown, who's our state assembly member, as well as Senator Ben Hueso, as well as Senator Marty Block, who's just to the north of us, I think we can make a really strong argument to Caltrans that they need to pay up. And they not only need to pay up for the money that they say that they spend each year, which I'm highly doubtful they don't. We need to really look at the historical underinvestment in this roadway. More importantly, we need to do some comparative analysis to see how much they spend in areas that are a little more higher income than Imperial Beach, because I guarantee you what the governor and folks at Sacramento are saying is that Caltrans has contributed to the sort of inequity of investment in the state. And that's something the governor is very concerned about, social inequity, and really rectifying that by making sure that Caltrans doesn't dictate the economic future of cities and gives cities a lot more independence in how they manage their roadways. So anyway, I'm very confident that we can negotiate something equitable with Caltrans. I think the other person that would be important to talk to is Gary Gallegos of Sandag, who's probably the most knowledgeable person in our region on this issue. He's a great sort of third-party person to consult with. So anyway, I want to thank council colleagues for those excellent questions and comments, as well as the great staff work that's been done. But again, I'm confident that we can make a very, very excellent case to Caltrans to actually pay their fair share and also really pay what they haven't spent already. So thank you. With that, I'm not sure there's any vote or action recommended. I think we made our comments. Colleagues are good. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Now we move on to report 5.2, discussion and proposed revisions in Imperial Beach sign code related to digital signs. And once again, Assistant City Manager Wade, you are up.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Our recommendation is to essentially receive this report. This is an update for our changes that we've been working on for some time now on the city's sign code ordinance. Specifically, this presentation will deal with digital signs and wayfinding signs, and we'd like some direction and input from the council. There are some options. Digital signs are essentially, I think we all know what they are. They can be either on public or private property. Oftentimes on public property, they convey messages to the public, whether it be community interest or general information such as weather and other types of information. We often use we have some mobile signs that you often see in the streets that provide some of that type of information. We could prohibit these types of signs, both on private and public property. And let's just talk with private property, prohibit them or allow them with regulations. Typically regulations for private property signs, and for those types of signs, you're talking about business signs that have changeable copy, that might have running banner or headline. What the standard for regulation is how many movements can occur in a certain period of time. A static display of 5 to 8 seconds, for example, no scrolling or animation. And the reason these regulations are applied is for safety reasons. Vehicles driving by can be distracted by those types of signs, especially if they're moving frequently. And there's certain regulations and standards, very technical. You get down to things like brightness or nits, and at nighttime versus daytime, and how frequently these signs can change. So those are some of the regulations in terms of option 2, allowing and regulating for private signs. Then you have public signs, which I mentioned. One option would be to prohibit them. Another would be to allow them with, again, regulations. And one of the regulations obviously could be discretionary approval. That could also be a regulation for private signs. What types of information might be conveyed. We have to be very careful with that. And then option 3 would be allowing them, but with stricter controls. Oops, I went too far. As I mentioned, we've been working for some time on updating our sign code, and frankly, we have been basically overloaded with other priorities, but we're here to get your input on this element. And once we have your input on this element, we plan to bring back the sign code ordinance for consideration by the council. There have been advances, obviously, in technology over the years, and you oftentimes see, for example, billboards that are changeable copy now. There's one on I-5 near Chula Vista as you drive north on I-5, and there are standards that you can employ to regulate those signs. These are some of the images of some of the public property signs that cities have provided to convey information. And again, just some examples of those. This one, however, is a billboard. Other jurisdictions have looked into these regulations. City of Carlsbad approved sign code changes that allowed digital signs, but actually, even though they did that, they denied a permit for a car dealer to have one along the freeway. That was kind of a publicized case. The City of Vista is considering digital billboards or message boards rather, and the City of Santee is considered a digital billboard also for a car dealership. They have car dealerships and freeway identification signs have a whole set of different regulations, and honestly, I think we're happy that we don't have to address those because we're not adjacent to a freeway. Included among these types of signs are what we call wayfinding signs, the wayfinding signage, and the city has spoken over the years about the possibility of providing some wayfinding signage, particularly as it relates to ecotourism or birding or other points of interest in the city. Because of advances in technology, some of those wayfinding signs are now incorporating digital elements, and you see some of them here. There are some in downtown. So that could be something that could help to educate tourists and residents as well as other visitors to the city. So we haven't provided a whole lot of input. What I would also like to say is the last time we presented to this council, the council asked us to seek out input from the Chamber of Commerce and VID. We presented the information, and the chamber essentially said they did not have any preference to have them at the meeting we presented them to. That was the comment received, and we're back to report that comment. Again, it might have been limited by the people in attendance. We don't know, but that was the comment received as, in a general way, that they did not want to support digital signs on private property. With that said, there is a practical difficulty in administering or regulating digital signs on private property. And oftentimes, even if you have the regulations, they're abused. Recently, there was about a year or two ago, there was a flashing sign in a business on Palm that looked almost identical to a police siren, and we immediately received several complaints about it. So there's a practical difficulty of administering and regulating that type of ordinance. If council wanted to consider it, I think staff's recommendation would be there might be a practical use for public property for digital signs subject to discretionary review or a conditional use permit. That way you could consolidate. These aren't cheap devices, but you could potentially consolidate, for example, where we have banner poles and they become sometimes a little bit unruly and difficult to manage, into a public message sign board that can satisfy the needs of a variety of information without the unruliness of putting up banners. So that might be something the council would wish to consider. And that's about it for the staff report. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. We have a number of comments from the public, starting with Marcus Boyd.
Good evening, council, city staff, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for taking a moment to listen to me. I am.
Could you just, for your record, do name it?
I'm sorry. Yes, Marcus Boyd, 1233 Palm Avenue, 14-year business owner on Palm. We experienced the redevelopment agency's version of facelift at our building, which is the Quonset Hut, one of the ugliest buildings in town, next to AT&T, I might add. But we lost a sign, and it was because of the sign code, which said that if there was any kind of an upgrade for the building, you're going to have to comply with the newest sign laws. However, McDonald's recently, I would say, did a minor update, and their sign is still there. And from what I understand from the recent newspaper article, it's going to remain there. And it was just because they said that they want to leave town, they can't have their sign. So I'm concerned that a sign ordinance is only going to apply to those that can't put up a name like McDonald's. And I think it's imperative that the council speak about specifically that sign if you're going to talk about implementing more sign ordinances, because that one was completely ignored, and it was unfair to the businesses that had to comply with that. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Now we have Candy Unger. No. Oh, I'm sorry, donating time to, sorry, okay. Christine Leposki, would you don't want to speak, but you, okay, it's a multiple business owner, and the comment is, I want our village, beach community to be free from digital signs. I feel the same as a resident. Thank you. Now we have Mr. Jim Mickelson. You have time donated from Candy Unger, and would you like to speak? Thank you.
Jim Mickelson, 169 Elkwood. I've seen you before as a representative of the Chamber of Commerce. Tonight I'm here as not a representative of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm here as a businessman, a citizen, and somebody that's concerned about our sign ordinances. You know, I'm looking at the staff's recommendation. I was privileged to be a new member of the board on the Chamber of Commerce the day that the city staff came in for the presentation. It came without any advance notice. It was a surprise that was going to happen. Additionally, in trying to research since the beginning of time, which is about February 2013, when the sign ordinance revisions were first identified, whether or not the chamber had actually pulled its members, I could not find any. So I'm concerned that we maybe have dropped the ball and adequately representing to you what the business community is. But let me first say, I support option 2 for both private and public land, public property. What's good for the city, I think is good for the businessman. Mr. Wade identified that it's tough to police regulations. It's tough to police any regulation, and signage is no difference. Our current sign ordinances, looking to sections 19.52, indicates that all changeable copy signs are banned. So right now, any sign that changes is banned. And it looks like this ordinance goes back over 20 years ago. And I think back to what technology we had 20 years ago for signs. We didn't have the type of monitor displays we now have today in the thin screen TVs. We see on outdoor signs now, something similar to what we see in our TVs. To do nothing leaves us in what I consider a blight situation. We now have real estate offices putting 8.5 by 11 signs in the windows of listing their homes. We now have fast food restaurants placed in every window a sign advertising some special of the month there. We now have liquor stores placing paper signs in their windows. All those kinds of signs, I think technology can now replace them in the form of digital signs that have a time, place, and manner restriction upon them. We're looking not only to what our present businesses are within the community, but what the future businesses may be. They may be local businesses, they may be regional businesses, they may be national businesses that we now see showing interest in our community. And some of those businesses are very forward-thinking businesses when it comes to marketing their business. And I believe we should take a position to give them a variety of opportunities, such as digital, not only signs on the street, but with appropriate, as Mr. Wade indicated, the brightness, the frequency of change. I looked at some reports around, I saw frequency of change anywhere from 10 seconds to 62 seconds. But imagine Burger King with one digital sign, this front window was changed every 15 seconds or 30 seconds and advertise their Big Macs, their different kinds of sandwiches they want to offer, or imagine the real estate office in their front window, a appropriate sized sign which changes every few minutes, showing the offering of properties rather than 8.5 by pieces of paper in the windows. My suggestion to the council is that we're not ready to foreclose any change, but that we should look at the options too for both city and private, that we notify all businesses, not just chamber members, that there is a public workshop possible to get true input, what the businesses want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mickelson. Now we move on to council comments. Councilmember Patton. I'm sorry.
I didn't push my button.
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Spriggs, do you have any comments?
You need your button. I think this is, a subject we need to, that it's the right time for us to take it up. But I think the context is bigger than digital signs. If we talk about it from the sort of public and community standpoint, there's sort of two big ways to look at it. It seems to me one is the public and community standpoint and people knowing what's going on in the community. That's sort of the public event kind of thing. And the other is individual businesses promoting their products, their business, their services, what have you. The two things are kind of hard to, they're really separate topics in a way to me. They're hard to talk about in the same way because they evoke different values, different objectives. I'm more comfortable, I think, talking about the more public aspect of it because we really want and need the public to be aware of as many things going on in Imperial Beach as possible. Public awareness, public information, folks knowing what's going on, folks being able to adjust their day, their calendars to around what's being planned, or even spontaneously traveling through town, seeing that there is a chili cook-off in the Veterans Park or something going on at the beach, and they hadn't even planned on going down to the plaza. I can see from a public information standpoint that, this could be very valuable for the kind of community that we want to be, an informed community. We want to be friendly to tourists, friendly to visitors, but we also want our own community to be aware of, what's going on. And it's not only the signs, it's just everything else that we do. It's the city website, it's other ways that we communicate about these things. So if our overall goal is, one of our overall goals, on the public front anyway, is better information available to the public, then having some sort of digital sign on one or more pieces of public property that can convey that information, I think would be very valuable. And that opens up all kinds of questions about whether it's only city programs, government programs, whether it's activities that the city is a participant in, if not the only participant, but there's maybe an organization. What about nonprofit organizations? Would their events be able to be publicized in this digital signage, et cetera? In my view, if we're going to go the public information route, again, setting aside for a minute the business side, that we would want to have it available as broadly as possible and develop guidelines that would allow that to happen, even though that would be very challenging to do. But that's kind of where my thinking is that what we ought to be thinking about. On the private business side, I think I agree with one of the comments made from the public, Jim's comment that we've really got to hear from the business community. We need more input from the business community. And one sort of anecdotal bit of information from one chamber meeting isn't enough for us to, I think, intelligently discuss a digital signage approach. And maybe it could be another city council meeting where we actually pose some questions to the chamber to come back to us after time for them to have a couple meetings and discuss it. Or maybe it's a workshop. I don't know. But I don't think I feel comfortable talking about business signage without the business community pushing and pressing for something that they'd like, or providing some parameters, that we could talk about, some ideas that we could talk about. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Okay, now Councilmember Cotton, you did press the button. Great, thank you.
So
okay.
Our superstars are BID and chamber community, so no disrespect either way, but for me, these signs, they're tacky digital signs. They failed at past council meetings. And yes, there's a advance in technology, but we're putting up glorified computer screens. That's what they are. And wayfinding, here's my wayfinding. I can find where I need to go. They're hard to regulate. We'll have some freedom of speech issues. Maybe there's a family group that wants to put their sign up, and maybe there's a controversial group that wants to put their sign up. So how do we regulate that? And then the cost of the person regulating that and maintaining those signs are other things we need to look at. And of course, I think every business would want a digital sign. Why not? Every business, hey, shop here, buy this. So we, so we need to kind of weigh that out. And then I look at my card, my council card, and there's a mission statement on the back. And it says, to maintain and enhance Imperial Beach as classic Southern California, as a beach-oriented community with a safe, small town, family atmosphere, rich in natural and cultural resources. I'm not sure if digital signs fits in this mission statement. So that's what I have to say about it. I'm against them for all those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. First, thanks for the report. And I guess there are two issues. One is about the public signs on public property. I'm not clear that I've heard enough information on private signage. I think it's an emerging technology and tool. I know that the business community definitely, I think as Mr. Mickelson said, I think it would be good to have some sort of, and my council colleague had said, some sort of public workshop and more input, not just from chamber members, but from the entire, the business community as a whole. And really maybe just identify some cities where this has been done, and cities that it hasn't been done or something, but just get more information. But I definitely think the business community would like to have a lot more information. So anyway. With that, let's make sure we can, there's no more questions or comments. I think there was no voter action recommended. I think we've given feedback to the staff. Are my council colleagues satisfied with that?
I think to a degree. I'm just not sure what, I think I'd have to ask the city manager whether he's got enough feedback, because I'm not sure I'd know what to do if I was in right now.
We've got just enough feedback to keep the item where it currently is. Just on that list.
Let's face it, when Mrs. Bragg is back, I think we'll add a little flair to the conversation as well. So,
But we did get direction that you guys want more input, perhaps at a workshop or something like that. I was being a little facetious. Yeah, I do think we got some feedback.
At the risk of opening up the discussion again, Councilmember Bilbray, would you like to speak?
No, you got it.
Okay, guess we'll move on. Thank you. And now the last presentation of the evening, I think, Assistant City Manager Wade, you're done for the evening. Thank you very much. Thank you. I got a lot of hits tonight. That was good. All right. Now we have item 5.3, strategy for goal identification, establishing budget and capital improvement plan priorities. And City Manager Andy Hall will do the presentation.
Mayor and Council, at your recent retreat, Councilmember Spriggs and Councilmember Bragg were asked to put together a strategy for us to obtain the input necessary to set some goals and priorities for your budget and for your capital improvements program. We had a chance to meet with them, and they have an idea that with some strong emphasis on public outreach and public input. And they wanted to make sure that the public is more involved in the budget process this year, as well as setting the priorities for the capital projects where you'll be spending money to improve the community as well. And so they have proposed a public outreach event, perhaps over at Veterans Park on April 23rd. And we're trying to make sure that that coincides with the preparation of the budget and the upcoming budget workshops that the City Council will be having to become more familiar with the budget, as well as setting your priorities for your next 2-year implementation schedule of the capital improvements program. Just so that you know, I know you had a chance to read through the staff report. I did present this idea to the city staff. Public safety did tell us that they would prefer that the time change, or the time that you have in your report is 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evening on April 23rd. They thought it might be a better idea for that to be 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, especially that it's an open house environment, people can come and go. But that would allow the event to end while it's still light outside, might be a little bit safer and whatnot. So that was one suggestion we had from the staff. Having said that, I certainly would turn the time over to Councilmember Spriggs, since he was part of that subcommittee that was established at the retreat. Before I do that, though, I did get a chance to talk with Councilwoman Bragg tonight, who couldn't make it due to illness, and said that she's comfortable having an outreach event. She just wants to make sure that the process as we move forward, not just this year, but that we establish a tradition that in our budgeting process, setting our priorities, so that they feel a little bit more in touch with what it is that the city council is trying to accomplish. Having said that, Mayor, if there's no questions for me directly, I would turn it over to Councilmember Spriggs for his thoughts.
Thanks for the summary, Mr. Hall. I think you said it all. There's two things that we're really looking at in terms of decision making, and you mentioned them. I'll mention them again. One is the budget, which is our annual expenditures, and that process is coming up in May and June. And the other is our capital budget, which is where we invest city funds in things like roads or programs like Bikeway Village, etc. These are more strategic kinds of investments. So there's two kinds of processes to try to get a handle on what we ought to be doing as a community. One is the community knowing what our departments are doing and what they're proposing a la the budget. So this big budget fair, which would have food and be festive and invite the community to participate in, would be about that. And our department heads would have, and departments would have an opportunity to talk about their programs and where they're going and what their needs are and that sort of thing. We feel that would be really a great tradition to start, and something we could try in this community, and if it works, because we are a small community, if it works, it would be great. And now's the time to try it. The second aspect of it is the more strategic, and we've been talking on this council about using the year 2000 document called the Big Picture as our strategic starting point, and to update that along with the public and invite public participation in discussions about the Big Picture document, which talks about Imperial Beach as a whole and each area of Imperial Beach and what the vision of each area would be. And that is a great tool to think longer term about where our capital investments ought to be going, and what kind of a community do we want to be, and what do we want each of our different neighborhoods to look like. And it's time to redo it, because the year 2000, a lot of things changed. And so the first, what Councilmember Bragg and I were discussing with the city manager, is our first shot at looking at the Big Picture document in a public arena would be one of several, but it would be before the budget process starts. And it might be in a council meeting like this, or it might be in a workshop. I kind of think that a workshop is a more inviting way to do things. We would again have probably refreshments served after the workshop, try to get everybody to come out, as many people as possible, to think about the future of our community that we all love so much, and using that document as a framework for the discussion. So that's kind of what we were proposing, and we know it's ambitious because it's a lot to get ready for a sort of department fair of that type, and a workshop or a meeting around the Big Picture document. We know that one of the concerns that the city manager may have is the workload on staff in order to do these things before the budget process, just within the next month or so. And we respect that workload on the staff in order to do these, to pull these public meetings off. So I actually throw that back to you, Mr. Hall, as whether this is a realistic plan to do both of these exercises, public exercises, before the budget meetings start taking place later in May or June.
Sure. Well, what we had proposed, or what was proposed in the conversation, just so the public knows, is that there would be a public gathering that we would hold at Veterans Park across the street. It would be prepared in an open house type fashion, where each department, where people could go and see each department, what they have planned for the coming year, some of the projects that we're working on, what their budget entails, a little bit, maybe even the personnel structure of each department, and what's happening in the community, so that we can get community input on the budget portion of that. And then we would also ask for the types of improvements that the residents would like to see in the community, some of the projects they'd like to see us set as high priorities for our capital improvements program. There was talk about the fact that this could serve a lot of purposes. This council has made has given clear direction that they would like to see more public outreach, and perhaps we can provide. I think we talked about maybe providing some hot dogs and sodas, so that people, it's kind of that community, like you said, maybe a budget fair, or just an opportunity for people to come out, get to know each other a little bit, talk about what's happening in the community, understand the finances of the city a little bit better, and just have a general input session that we can then condense and bring back to the city council. Our first budget workshop that we have on the calendar right now, it's going to be the Wednesday night in between two of your regular meetings on May 18th, and that will be dedicated to just the budget. And so we believe that if we can hold an event, and the date we have tentatively scheduled is April 23rd, we can then take that information, consolidate it down, and give you some recommendations from what we heard from the public at that meeting on May 13th. The city council is required to adopt the budget prior to the end of June. Our fiscal year begins July 1st, ends June 30th. The city council adopts a 2-year budget. And so just to let you know, the staff portion of that budget preparation is essentially finished now, and we will be able to talk with residents and the city council with some certainty about where we are with expenditures, revenues, and what we have in the non-assigned fund balances for capital projects. So to answer your question, I think we can be prepared for something like that. I think the department heads are anxious to have an opportunity to share what they are doing in their departments with residents in the community, and I think it could be a nice event, especially if we could build some momentum and have something on a regular basis, an annual basis, so that the residents feel like they have participation and input into the budget process.
Great, thank you. I don't see any council members requesting to speak. Great, I want to thank you for that presentation, and council members, Ms. Briggs and Bragg, thank you very much for working on this. I think I share your belief in this whole concept of participatory budgeting, which I think is a movement with cities throughout the United States to really get the community more engaged and really identifying and working with city staff and the council to identify priorities in the city. So this is a great way to start that process. I've been really impressed with the Palm Avenue master planning public outreach process and the way those meetings were held, with the sort of input process and the tabling and really soliciting feedback. I know the port's done that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, I think that format is excellent. It provides a lot more engagement. Our community likes to chat and talk, and have that interaction rather than having someone at a table speaking. So I think the more we can do that and make it a good event where people feel like they've had the opportunity to meet folks and talk about their priorities, I think would be great. So anyway, with that.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, we'll start maybe with hot dogs this year, and as the budget improves, we'll move to crab cakes next year. Yeah, I think it'll be a fun event. And so the only thing I would ask, Mayor, is to get some confirmation that everyone's okay with that. So we don't have very much time. Today's the 1st. We're looking at the 23rd. We want to get started right away if that's the
I can request that we have a motion to approve a public.
I'll make the motion to go ahead and adopt the recommendations of.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
Excuse me?
Were you chairing the meeting?
I'm saying, I'm making a motion on my own as a council member to adopt the recommendations made by the ad hoc committee for our council members Spriggs and Bragg.
Would you like to vote?
Mr. Mayor, please vote. Motion carried unanimously by those present.
With that, we adjourn the meeting. Thank you.